You look like you really need a hug. The voice floated through the icy hush of Central Park, gentle yet unmistakable. Marcus Carter turned his head, dragging himself out of the heavy fog inside his chest. A small black girl stood in front of him, cheeks flushed red from the cold, one glove missing. Her curls were tucked under an oversized knit beanie, and she stared up at him with calm, unwavering eyes. "What did you say?" he asked quietly. "You look like you need a hug," she repeated, as if pointing out the weather. People didn't usually talk to Marcus, not like this, not straight through the armor he wore. "I'm Zoe," she added, shifting on the frozen path. "I'm 6, almost 7. My mom says hugs don't fix everything," Zoe continued matter-of-factly, "but they help a lot." Marcus let out a soft, surprised breath that almost became a laugh. "That's pretty wise," he said. "I'm older than I look," she grinned. "On the inside." Zoe glanced down at her wrist, where a colorful yarn bracelet sat, threaded with cheap plastic beads. After a moment, she unclasped it carefully and held it out. "You should wear this. It helps when I'm sad." Marcus stared, unsettled by the generosity. The bracelet was clearly handmade, edges fuzzy, colors uneven but bright. It looked precious, like something she'd refuse to lose. "I can't take that," Marcus protested gently. "It's okay," she insisted, gently sliding it over his leather glove. "I can make another. You look like you need this more." The bracelet sat awkwardly against his tailored wool coat and expensive watch, but somehow it felt right. "I'm Marcus," he said quietly. "Nice to meet you, Zoe." She beamed. "Want to meet my mom? She's right there." Zoe pointed toward a bench near the winding path. A woman sat there bundled in a heavy coat, watching Zoe with the intense focus of someone who'd lost too much already. A paper grocery bag rested at her feet. Her face looked tired, but her posture was alert, ready to move. "Come on," Zoe said, grabbing his hand. Marcus let himself be led, absurdly aware of the situation. A 40-something CEO being dragged through the snow by a nearly 7-year-old stranger. Yet something about Zoe's presence made it impossible to retreat. As they approached, the woman stood up, eyes flicking from Zoe to Marcus. "Zoe," she said, voice firm but not harsh. "We've talked about wandering off." "I didn't go far, Mama," Zoe protested. "He looked like he needed somebody." The woman's gaze settled on Marcus, cautious but civil. "Sorry if she bothered you," she said. "She's very forward." "It's all right," Marcus replied, his tone gentler than usual. "She's special." The woman studied the bracelet on his wrist, then his face. "She doesn't give those to everyone," she said quietly. "Only when she really means it." Marcus nodded. "I figured. I'm honored." After a moment, she gestured toward the bench. "I'm Lena," she introduced herself. "Would you like some coffee? It's cheap instant, but it's hot." Marcus nodded, unexpectedly grateful. They sat. She poured from a battered thermos into a plastic lid, steam curling into the cold afternoon air. Zoe nestled between them, cradling a small cup of cocoa. The coffee was harsh and overly sweet, but it warmed Marcus's hands. "You're not a regular park bench guy," Lena observed after a beat. "No," Marcus admitted. "I live a few blocks up, West End Avenue." Her eyebrows rose slightly. "Didn't picture you as the bundled up alone in the park type." Marcus gave a small shrug. "Today's an exception." "Anniversary?" she asked softly. He blinked. "What?" "You've got that look," Lena said. like you're remembering something that hurts more on certain days. He hesitated, eyes drifting toward the frozen lake. 4 years ago, I lost my wife and son. Car crash. Lena's breath hitched, forming a faint cloud in the air. I'm sorry, she murmured. I think I might have been there that night, at Midtown General. Marcus turned slowly. You? I used to work in the emergency department, she said. There was a wreck that night. Mother and boy, both critical. She wore a little locket on a thin chain. His pulse spiked. Silver chain, gold clasp, he asked hoarsely. Yes, Lena whispered. That's them, Marcus said, his voice tight. You were there? She nodded. I didn't know who the husband was. It was chaos, but I stayed with her as long as they let me. Something hot and aching rose in Marcus's chest. Thank you. Lena looked away, eyes glassy. I'm sorry. We couldn't do more. You stayed, Marcus said, and the words rough but sincere. That's more than most people. Stories like this remind us that tiny kindnesses can shift entire lives. Tell us where you're watching from in the comments. We love seeing your cities and countries show up. And hey, if you haven't already, tap that like button and subscribe for more stories that linger long after the screen goes dark. The three of them sat in quiet for a while, listening to the wind. Zoe's head tipped against Lena's shoulder, her eyes growing heavy. I was in nursing school, Lena said softly. Had to drop out when I had Zoe. Still dream about finishing someday. You should, Marcus replied, glancing at Zoe, then at her. Some people are built to help. Lena gave a tired half-smile. Helping people doesn't always pay rent. Marcus looked down at the bracelet circling his wrist. The cheap yarn suddenly felt weighty, like a promise he hadn't agreed to but deeply needed. He stood eventually. I'll be around, he said, if you don't mind. Lena studied him, trying to read intent. We're here most afternoons, she said finally. Marcus nodded, then looked at Zoe. Thank you for the bracelet. She yawned. Keep it till you're not sad anymore, she murmured. As he walked away, the winter air felt slightly less brutal. Back in his sleek upper-floor condo, Marcus faced his bathroom mirror the next morning, fully dressed in a charcoal suit and pale blue tie. His gaze, however, was drawn not to the tie's perfect knot, but to the bright bracelet snug around his wrist. He'd tried twice to slip it off already. Each time his fingers touched the frayed yarn, something inside him balked, as if removing it might sever the thin thread, pulling him out of his isolation. With a sigh, he left it where it was, just for today. His high-rise on the Upper West Side looked out over glass towers and old stone, ambition stacked on ambition. Inside, the air felt sterile, untouched by laughter. A plate of scrambled eggs and sliced grapefruit, his son's old favorite breakfast, cooled untouched on the marble counter. He pushed the plate away. It was too early to head to the park, yet 10 minutes later, he shrugged on his overcoat, slid his hands into leather gloves, and stepped into the elevator. Anyway, logic protested. Habit was silent. By 9:30, he was at the lake. A fresh powder of snow dusted the winding paths. The bench from yesterday sat empty, dusted white. Marcus lowered himself onto the cold slats, the chill bleeding through his coat. He stared at the bracelet. Blue, orange, green. Threads knotted with clumsy care. No motive, no angle. Just kindness. He sat nearly an hour before leaving for his office tower. That afternoon, during a quarterly review, one of the partners glanced at his wrist. "New look, Mr. Carter?" the man joked lightly. "Very festive." Marcus didn't answer, just rubbed the bracelet with his thumb beneath the polished table. It didn't remind him of Charity. It reminded him he was still human underneath the titles. Later, exactly when the previous day's sun had begun to fade, Marcus returned to Central Park. This time, the bench was occupied. Lena sat reading a worn paperback. Zoe fed pigeons nearby. "Hey," Marcus called softly. Zoe's head snapped up, her face lighting like a lamp. "Mr. Marcus," she squealed, racing toward him and wrapping her arms around his waist. Lena rose, brushing snow from her coat. "Guess you're a regular now," she said, eyebrow lifting in amusement. "Looks that way," he replied. Lena's eyes flicked to his wrist. "You kept it," she noted quietly. Marcus raised his arm. "I tried to take it off, couldn't quite manage it." Zoe grinned. "Told you it helps." Lena shook her head. She believes her crafts are magical. "I'm starting to wonder if she's right," Marcus said. "It's been a long time since anyone gave me something just because they wanted to." Lena studied him. "You didn't just stumble over here again by accident, did you?" He exhaled. "No, I didn't." "Thought so," she replied. She gestured to the bench. "Sit. Coffee?" He nodded. They passed the thermos back and forth, Zoe curled between them with her cocoa. "Zoe was born at Midtown Memorial," Lena said. "I was 26. Her dad bailed before she turned 1. Marcus didn't flinch. "I'm sorry," he said. "I'm not," Lena replied. "It was brutal, but it taught me what staying actually looks like." Marcus nodded slowly. "She was quiet as a baby, not anymore. Now she's all questions and motion." Marcus smiled faintly. "Yesterday she asked if people ever stop being sad. I didn't know." "Do you know today?" Lena asked. Marcus looked at the frozen lake. "Not really," he admitted, "but I think I want to find out." They fell silent. Then he turned to Zoe. "You come here every day?" "Not Sundays," she said proudly. "That's library day. I love stories." "Me too," Marcus said. "Got a favorite?" "Harold and the Purple Crayon," she answered instantly. "He draws his own world." Marcus's lips twitched. Good choice. A gust of wind swept through, and Lena tightened Zoe's coat. Her eyes flicked toward the playground. "Want to take her over?" she asked. "I'll pack up our stuff." Marcus hesitated, but Zoe was already tugging his hand. "Come on! You have to see the twisty slide." The playground was nearly empty. A few bundled kids clung to swings. Marcus steadied Zoe as she climbed the ladder, his hands moving instinctively. "Watch this," she called from the top, eyes bright. She barreled down the slide, landing in a burst of powder and breathless laughter. Marcus laughed too, unexpectedly loud, the sound unfamiliar in his own throat. "Again!" she shouted, racing back up. He didn't hurry her. Time stretched kindly. When they returned, Zoe's cheeks glowed pink, and her gloveless hand was nearly numb. Lena watched them, a trace of wonder in her expression. "She doesn't usually trust people this fast," she said. "She's kind of impossible not to like," Marcus replied. They gathered their things as daylight faded. Marcus offered to walk them to the shelter. Lena shook her head. "We've got it. You've already done enough." He crouched to Zoe's level. "I'll see you again?" "You'd better," she said, mock stern. Lena smiled. "Same time tomorrow?" she asked. "Same time," he promised, watching them disappear into trees. That night, in his silent condo, Marcus did something he'd avoided for 4 years. He opened a drawer, pulled out a framed photo of his wife and son, and set it on the mantel. He stood there a long time, the city humming faintly beyond the windows. I met someone today, he murmured to the picture. Two someones, actually. He didn't know what this new thread in his life would become. For once, he didn't feel adrift, just cautiously tethered. The bracelets on his wrist tugged at him, bright, childish, holding more than just his skin. Days slipped into a gentle pattern. Each afternoon, as the sun dropped behind the skyline, Marcus found himself walking the familiar loop around the lake to that same bench. Lena and Zoe were always there, sometimes feeding birds, sometimes reading, sometimes simply existing together in a small, self-contained world. On one afternoon, as the hints of early spring softened the air, Zoe greeted him with a new bracelet, this one bright yellow and green. "You have to wear them together," she insisted. Marcus obliged, his wrist now a colorful contrast to his cufflinks. He carried that brightness everywhere, Lena noticed. "You don't hide them under your sleeves," she observed while they shared coffee. "Most people would. I spent years hiding everything that hurt," Marcus said. "Feels like I owe it to myself not to hide what's helping." Lena looked at her hands. "That's braver than you think." "Surviving quietly is braver," he countered. She didn't argue, but her silence was full. Later, while Zoe pumped her legs on the swings, Lena spoke again. "Saw your picture yesterday," she said. "Business section. Marcus Carter, CEO of Carter & Rowe Capital." He exhaled. "I was wondering when that'd happen." "I recognized your face first," she admitted. "Didn't connect the name until I read the caption." "Most people know the company, not the person running it," he said. "Does it change anything?" She considered. "Not really, but it explains the suit." They both laughed, tension easing for a moment. Then her expression sobered. "I looked up the accident," she said carefully. Marcus tensed. "I wanted to be sure it was the same night. At the ER, I didn't know who you were, but I remembered your wife and little boy." Marcus said nothing, so she continued gently. "She had a wedding band with something etched inside," Lena said. "I kept tracing it when we couldn't find her ID." Marcus swallowed. "It says, 'Still forever wouldn't be long enough.'" Lena nodded. "That's what I saw." Silence settled, heavy but reverent, like a moment in a chapel. "I stayed with her," Lena whispered, voice trembling, "until she was gone. I thought someone should be there." Marcus's eyes burned. "Thank you," he said, words breaking. "I never knew what those last hours were like. It means more than I can explain." Tears shone in Lena's eyes, too. "I've never told anyone that," she admitted. "Not really." They sat without speaking, Zoe's laughter drifting over from the swings. "She was kind," Lena added. "Scared, but calm somehow, brave." Marcus closed his eyes. "She was the best person I knew." Lena hesitated, then laid her hand over his. A week later, Marcus invited them to a cramped cafe off Columbus Avenue. It wasn't fancy. Checkered floors, laminated menus, waitresses who knew regulars by name. Zoe attacked a grilled cheese and tomato soup like it was a feast, while Lena ordered nothing more extravagant than coffee and a BLT. Marcus watched them, struck by how full the small space felt. Zoe's giggles over floating croutons, Lena's habit of wrapping both hands around her mug, the quiet way they shared glances. It all hummed with a kind of connection he hadn't realized he missed until it was in front of him. Walking them back afterward, Zoe skipping between them, Marcus turned to Lena. "Do you still want to finish nursing school?" he asked. She blinked. "I think about it every day." "So, what's in the way?" "Money, time. being almost 30 and starting over, fear of failing. "You're not too late," he said. She shook her head. "I can't take help like that. It would feel wrong." "This isn't pity," Marcus replied softly. "It's an investment in someone who stayed when it counted." She met his gaze. "You don't have to fix my life." "I know," he said simply. Zoe tugged his sleeve. "Can we get hot chocolate?" "Only if we drown it in marshmallows," Marcus teased. That night, instead of zoning out in front of the TV, he sat by the fire with his late wife's old journal open on his lap. He flipped through pages filled with everyday scribbles. Birthday notes, grocery lists, messy hearts. Tucked in the middle, he found a page he'd forgotten. Her handwriting. "If I'm ever gone, please don't shut down. Let someone in, even if it looks different from us. Let it still be good." Marcus stared at the words for a long time, throat tight. Slowly, he set the journal beside the framed photo on the mantel. His fingers brushed the bracelets on his wrist. 2 simple rings of yarn, worn but strong. The past would always walk beside him, but maybe not crush him. The following Saturday, the sky over Manhattan pressed low and gray, hinting at late snow. Marcus stood outside a cramped neighborhood market not far from the shelter, clutching a reusable bag of groceries. He hadn't told them he was coming. It felt important that this not be some grand gesture. Inside the bag, apples, cheddar cheese, a loaf of sourdough, herbal tea, and a bright cereal Zoe had raved about, the kind that turned milk neon colors. It wasn't extravagant, just thoughtful. He found them at their usual spot, the same bench by the playground, wind cutting through bare branches. "Afternoon," Marcus called. Zoe spotted him first. "Mr. Marcus," she yelled, sprinting toward him. Lena lifted her head, expression shifting from wary surprise to warmth. "You tracked us down on a Saturday," she said. "The shelter opens later, gets crowded fast." Marcus handed her the bag, brought a few things. Lena accepted it hesitantly. "You really didn't have to." "I know," he said. Zoe peeked into the bag and squealed. "The rainbow cereal!" Lena gave Marcus a look, softer now. "You remembered." "Some things are worth remembering," he answered. They shared coffee again, steam rising into the brittle air. Zoe built lopsided snow fortresses nearby, narrating elaborate stories about snow princesses and invisible dragons. Marcus watched, struck by the wildness of her imagination. "She's the reason I'm still here," Lena said suddenly. "After I dropped out, there were days I thought I couldn't do it alone. But every time she laughed, I knew I had to keep going." "You did more than just keep going," Marcus said. "You stayed on the hard days, too." Lena looked down at her gloves. "Showing up again and again when nobody's watching. That's the part nobody talks about." He nodded slowly. "That kind of consistency is the rarest kind of love," he said. Zoe bounded over, breathless. "Can I show you something?" She pulled a folded piece of construction paper from her pocket and handed it to him. Inside was a crayon drawing. 3 figures holding hands under a bright sun. One figure wore a dark suit with messy brown hair. Another had a purple dress and dark curls. The smallest had 2 bracelets and a huge grin. "That's me," Zoe announced. "And Mama, and you." Marcus swallowed. "It's beautiful," he said. "I made it for you," she added proudly. He folded the drawing carefully and slipped it inside his coat. "Then I'll keep it close," he promised. Outside the shelter later, Lena hesitated at the steps. "Thank you," she said. "Not just for today, for caring enough to show up." Marcus smiled. "It's not effort. It's a choice." Back home, he pinned Zoe's drawing above the fireplace, right beside the photo of his wife and son. For a long time, he just stood there, looking from one to the other. That week, he made a quiet call to a friend at a local community college. He asked about reinstating a nursing student who'd once had to drop out. Then he wrote a check for tuition, listing the donor as anonymous. He told himself it wasn't charity. It was recognizing someone who'd held another human's hand in their worst hour and choosing to honor that. When he saw Lena next, she looked exhausted but lighter, like someone carrying a different kind of weight. "I got a call," she said. "From Riverside Community College. Someone set up a scholarship in my name. Covers 2 semesters. Marcus raised his eyebrows. "That's incredible," he said, feigning surprise. She narrowed her eyes. "Any chance you know who anonymous benefactor might be?" "I might know someone who knows someone," he replied. Lena laughed softly. "You're impossible. Persistent," he corrected. Zoe tugged his sleeve. "Does this mean Mama gets to be Nurse Lena again?" "Yes, baby," Lena said, tearing up. "I do." Marcus crouched to Zoe's level. "Your mom is going to be one of the best nurses this city's ever seen," he said. "Can I be her helper?" Zoe asked. Lena looked between them. "Honey, you already are." That night, Marcus walked home beneath falling snow, chest strangely warm. The city glowed under streetlights, every flake catching the light. For the first time in years, he didn't feel like he was heading into emptiness. He was walking towards something messy and real, something born from a child's bracelet and an unexpected hug on a frozen afternoon. A drizzly Thursday found Marcus stepping into Carter and Rowe's marble-lined lobby wearing the same composed expression his staff recognized, but something underneath had shifted. As he walked past the receptionist, her eyes flicked down to the bright woven bracelets peeking out from beneath his crisp shirt cuff. She blinked, clearly surprised, but said nothing. His assistant, Carla, fell into step beside him. "Board meeting at 10, lunch with the Cargill investors at noon. Your brother called twice about the foundation gala." "Move the lunch," Marcus said. "I'll handle the board meeting, then I need the afternoon." Carla paused mid-stride. "Should I ask why?" Marcus gave a faint smile. "I promised somebody I'd be at the school office by 1:30. Carla studied him, recalibrating. "Understood," she said finally. In the boardroom, conversation dipped as he entered. They took in the suit, the calm, the bright bracelets. No one commented, but he felt their curiosity. He moved through the agenda with the usual precision. Yet, even as he spoke about projections and portfolios, part of him lingered on a small girl with crayon drawings and a mother relearning how to reach for her own future. He let the words sink in. "Thank you," he murmured. "Don't throw a parade yet," Naomi added. "This isn't the finale. She might go public. She might sue. But the narrative changed. You're no longer the confused relic." "I never was," Marcus said. "Now they know." After hanging up, he walked to the front parlor and sat. Morning light poured through tall windows, stretching long shadows. He didn't feel victorious exactly. He felt grounded, solid, like the spinning had stopped beneath his feet. Lena arrived half an hour later, already smiling as she burst through the door. "You heard?" she asked. "I did," he said. She rushed forward and hugged him without asking. He stiffened for an instant, then wrapped his arms around her. "You did it," she breathed. "No," he corrected gently. "We did." They celebrated with vanilla milkshakes and grilled cheese delivered from a nearby diner that had stood since the 60s. Marcus hadn't eaten from there in decades, but Lena insisted it was the only fitting choice. "Old place, warm food, no fancy silverware," she said, grinning, as they sat on the back patio while the city hummed in the distance. "Feels right." She squeezed his hand as they walked into a small office lined with children's artwork. The teacher, Mrs. Blake, a woman in her 60s with kind eyes behind reading glasses, greeted them with a surprised but welcoming smile when Marcus introduced himself as a family friend. "Zoe is remarkable," Mrs. Blake said once they sat. "Bright, curious, incredibly compassionate. She comforts other kids when they're upset. She's a natural helper." Marcus nodded, pride warming his voice. "That sounds like her." Mrs. Blake hesitated. "There is something else, though." Marcus felt his posture sharpen. "Go ahead." "She's mentioned being afraid at night," Mrs. Blake continued gently. "Not monsters, just this vague fear that her mother will disappear. She wakes from nightmares crying sometimes." The words hit Marcus like cold water. "She doesn't talk much about that with adults," he said. "She's trying not to worry her mom." After the meeting, Marcus walked with Zoe through the drizzle, holding her backpack while she jumped over puddles. He didn't mention the dreams. Instead, he asked about her favorite library books, which kids she liked sitting next to, and which lunchroom pudding was gross. She answered with dramatic seriousness. That evening, he met Lena on the shelter steps. Her shoulders drooped from the long orientation, but her eyes gleamed with purpose. "How was it?" he asked. "Overwhelming," she said. "In a good way, like I'm waking up an old part of myself." "Zoe's doing great," he told her. "But she's having some rough nights, bad dreams about losing you." Lena's expression softened painfully. "I know," she said. "She clings to me sometimes like I'll vanish. I keep telling her we're okay, but I can't fix everything." "You're doing more than enough," Marcus said firmly. "She feels you staying." They walked a few steps down the block together. "You skipped a big lunch today, didn't you?" Lena asked. Marcus shrugged. "The company runs fine without me for an afternoon. Zoe doesn't." Lena let out a quiet laugh. "Still," she said, "thank you. You're changing her world." "She changed mine first," Marcus answered. After a pause, he added, "Have you thought about moving out of the shelter permanently?" Lena stiffened. "James, Marcus," she corrected herself, flustered. "I can't just—" "I have a small, furnished studio near the park," he said. "It's been empty for years. No strings." "You know how this sounds, right?" she asked, folding her arms. "Like some wealthy guy rescuing the poor single mom." "I get it," he said calmly. "That's why I'm saying it carefully. You and Zoe deserve a door you can lock at night. That's all this is." She studied him, searching his face for something unspoken. Finally, she exhaled. "Let me think about it," she said. "That's all I'm asking," he replied. That night, Marcus drank chamomile tea by the window, watching headlights thread through the wet streets while his thoughts lingered on a tiny apartment. He didn't need spreadsheets to know he was changing. It wasn't just the bracelets or the new routines. It was the way Lena met life head-on, the way Zoe trusted despite every reason not to. He remembered a line from his wife's journal. "Real love isn't loud. It listens. It shows up again and again." "That's what I'm trying to do," he murmured. A few days later, he stood outside a modest brownstone walk-up near 86th Street, holding a simple set of keys, one for the front door, one for the tiny lobby mailbox. When he placed them in Lena's hand that evening, they both understood the weight. The studio upstairs had once housed visiting consultants. Now it smelled of fresh paint and faint lemon cleaner. It wasn't luxurious, but it was safe, warm and wholly theirs, for as long as they needed. Zoe darted inside, her small boots leaving wet marks on the floor. "Can I pick my bed?" she asked. "There's only one, baby," Lena said. "Then we share," Zoe declared. They ate pizza cross-legged on the floor that night, toasting with sparkling water in mismatched cups. It felt sacred. The week that followed was fragile and beautiful. Marcus visited often, sometimes with groceries, sometimes to help Zoe read, sometimes just to sit with Lena in the quiet glow of a cheap lamp. One gray afternoon, everything shattered. His phone buzzed during a meeting. A text from Lena. "Can you come?" "The shelter manager showed up," she said when he called. "He followed us after school, said I broke rules by leaving, threatened to call social services if we didn't come back." Marcus's jaw clenched. "They can't do that. Zoe's safe with you. They said I didn't report it. Protocols." "They're trying to scare you," Marcus said, anger flaring. "You did the right thing. I'll take care of this." In the mirrored elevator the next morning, his reflection looked polished as ever, but beneath the starched shirt and steel tie something fierce and focused burned. No one threatened them without answering to him. When Marcus stepped into his office, Carla glanced up from her computer, immediately reading the storm in his face. "Everything okay, sir?" He gave a curt nod. "I need the best pro bono family law attorney in New York. Today." Her fingers froze on the keyboard. "We already work with several firms," Carla said carefully. "Half a dozen could fit that description." "Not for the company," Marcus replied. "For someone else. And I want the one who doesn't flinch when a system starts hiding behind red tape." Carla straightened. "Understood. I'll find her." A few hours later, Marcus sat across from a sharp-eyed woman in a charcoal blazer. "Rachel Kane," she introduced herself, gripping his hand firmly. Known citywide for dismantling crooked custody cases, she'd built a reputation defending single mothers. The system preferred to forget. Marcus explained Lena's situation in detail. "She's now living legally in a private apartment?" Rachel asked, flipping through notes. "Leased, safe, no cost to her." "Exactly," Marcus answered. "And the shelter's threatening to report her for leaving. They're claiming she violated procedure, undermined their process, whatever that means." His voice tightened on the last word. Rachel's expression hardened. "Typical. They don't want to lose headcount. Their funding depends on bodies in beds, not actual safety." Marcus's jaw clenched. Rachel leaned forward. "I can file for a protective injunction. Keep child services from harassing her while we formalize everything. But I'll need her full story." "She'll talk," Marcus said without hesitation. "Lena's tougher than she thinks." Rachel nodded once. "Strength doesn't make you invisible to targeting," she replied. "Especially not if you're a single black woman in a system designed to blame you first." Marcus didn't answer, but the anger in his silence spoke loudly. That evening, Marcus knocked on the apartment door, a thick folder tucked under his arm and exhaustion hanging from his shoulders. Lena opened it barefoot, wearing a soft sweatshirt and leggings. The air smelled of rice, garlic, and simmering vegetables. Warm, real home. "You're early," she said, surprised. "I brought backup," he answered. He shifted aside so Rachel could step into view. Lena's posture tightened, not with hostility, but instinctive caution. "Lena, this is Rachel Kane," Marcus said. "She's a family attorney, one of the best in the city. I asked her to help." Lena folded her arms. "I didn't ask for a lawyer." "I know," Marcus said gently, "but you shouldn't have to face this alone." Rachel stepped forward, voice calm but firm. "Miss Ortiz, I understand the shelter has been trying to intimidate you. I've seen this exact playbook. We can push back, but I'll need everything. Even the parts you'd rather forget." Lena glanced toward the small table where Zoe sat coloring, humming to herself. "I don't want my daughter dragged into this mess," she said quietly. "She won't be," Rachel assured her. "Not if we do this right." They moved to the table. Marcus poured tea. Zoe was guided to her room, promised a story later. Then Lena began. She described the eviction that forced her into the shelter, the endless weeks waiting for placement, the dehumanizing curfews, the communal bathrooms, the screaming matches in the middle of the night that left Zoe shaking, the day she found mold on the food tray. The complaints ignored. She spoke about caseworkers who never looked her in the eye, who moved papers, checked boxes, typed notes, but didn't listen. And then she described the first night in the apartment. Quiet, clean, theirs. The first time in years she slept without jumping at every noise, without rehearsing an escape plan. By the time she finished, Rachel's pen had slowed to a stop. Her jaw was set. "I've handled hundreds of ugly situations," she said softly, "but this is outrageous." Lena's eyes glistened. They made me feel like a criminal, like wanting better for Zoe was some kind of crime. "It's not," Marcus said firmly. "It's the most unselfish thing you've ever done." Rachel rose from her chair. "I'll file in the morning. We'll ask for a hearing as soon as possible. If they push, I'll push harder." Lena swallowed, her voice barely audible. "Thank you." She meant it more than words. After Rachel left, Lena turned to Marcus. "I don't even know how to thank you," she whispered. "You don't owe me anything," he replied. "You're not alone in this anymore." The room fell quiet. Then Marcus added, softer, "When Zoe told me she dreams you disappear, I knew I couldn't stay hands off." Lena blinked, startled. Tears pooled at the corners of her eyes. She never tells me about those dreams," she said. "She's like you," Marcus answered. "Strong until it hurts. Even strong people need something to hold on to." Lena's fingers brushed his hand, just once, a fleeting, grateful touch. Later that night, after Zoe finally drifted off, they sat in the small living room, the city's noise muffled by old walls. Lena pulled a worn photo from a book, her holding a newborn Zoe in a hospital bed, both exhausted, both glowing. "She saved my life," Lena whispered. "I didn't realize how much I wanted to stay until I saw her." Marcus leaned back, staring at the ceiling. "I didn't know how much I wanted to feel anything again until I met you two," he admitted. Lena studied his profile. "Do you ever wonder if your wife would understand all this?" she asked softly. "You helping us? Being here like this?" Marcus sat quietly for a long moment. "She left me a note once," he said finally. "Said if anything ever happened to her, I shouldn't lock myself away. Told me to let someone in, even if it didn't look like what we'd had." His voice went rough on the last words. Lena smiled faintly. "Sounds like she knew you better than you know yourself." Marcus nodded. "She always did." As the night deepened, Lena rose. "I should get some sleep. Big day tomorrow." Marcus stood too. "You're not facing it by yourself," he said. She paused at her bedroom door. "Neither are you." For the first time since the shelter's threats, something sturdier than fear settled between them. A quiet certainty that whatever came next, they'd stand together. The courthouse on Center Street loomed like a stone giant the next morning, stoic under a pale sky. Inside, echoes of footsteps and hushed arguments filled the air. Marcus waited near the entrance, dressed in a navy suit that felt less like armor and more like a promise. Beside him, Lena paced slowly, clutching a folder stuffed with forms, letters, notes. Her life reduced to documentation. Zoe wasn't there. A neighbor upstairs had promised cartoons and pancakes. Today isn't for her, Marcus had insisted. Today, we handle the grown-up fight. Rachel arrived just before the hearing, her expression composed, eyes sharp. Judge Hartman's on the bench, she said. Fair, no patience for theatrics, likes facts, hates excuses. Lena inhaled shakily. Do we actually have a shot? We have more than a shot, Rachel replied, meeting her gaze. We have the truth and a paper trail. In courtroom 4B, harsh fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. A representative from the shelter sat opposite them, hiding behind a stack of neatly organized documents and an expression of practiced concern. His argument was clinical. Lena Ortiz had vacated her assigned shelter placement without proper authorization, violating state-managed housing protocols. Her move, he claimed, disrupted occupancy records and undermined procedural safeguards. Safety, he implied, was not the issue. Procedure was. The words made Lena's stomach twist. Marcus's hands curled into fists. Rachel rose, her voice level. Your Honor, Ms. Ortiz did not abandon services. She transitioned into safe, private housing freely offered, with no financial obligation and no coercion. She notified the shelter within 48 hours. This is not neglect. This is initiative being punished by bureaucracy. Judge Hartman studied the file. Ms. Ortiz has a child, correct? The judge asked. Yes, Your Honor, Rachel answered. A 7-year-old daughter, Zoe. She's thriving in school, up to date on medical visits, and currently living in a secure, stable environment. The judge turned her attention to Lena. Ms. Ortiz, why didn't you request clearance first? Lena stood, knees unsteady but voice clear. Because clearance takes weeks, sometimes months. There were roaches in the shelter kitchen, fights almost every night. My daughter heard screaming through thin walls. When someone offered us a clean, safe place, I chose my child instead of waiting for permission. The judge was silent for a moment, then looked toward the shelter representative. Was Zoe ever reported as missing? Any wellness check requested? No, Your Honor, he admitted. But protocol isn't law. Judge Hartman cut in sharply. And it certainly isn't a substitute for common sense. A low murmur rippled through the courtroom. Marcus watched Lena, pride swelling in his chest. She stood straighter than he'd ever seen her, shoulders squared, eyes steady. She didn't look like someone who needed saving. She looked like someone who had survived. After a few more tense exchanges, the judge leaned back in her chair, decision made. I've reviewed the statements and evidence, Judge Hartman said. I see no indication of abandonment or endangerment. Ms. Ortiz acted reasonably and in the best interests of her child. Lena's breath caught. Furthermore, the judge continued, this court issues a protective order preventing retaliatory or punitive action against Ms. Ortiz or her daughter without prior judicial approval. Rachel finally allowed herself a brief smile. Lena covered her mouth, tears spilling over. Marcus closed his eyes for a second, letting the relief crash through him like a wave. When they stepped outside into the daylight, the city looked different. Brighter, sharper, more possible. I can actually breathe, Lena whispered. You've earned that breath, Rachel replied. Marcus turned to the attorney. Thank you, he said. Really? Rachel gave a small nod. You believed her. That's more than most people ever bother to do. As she walked away, Lena turned to Marcus. I honestly didn't think we'd win, she admitted. You didn't just win, Marcus answered. You proved they don't get to define what's right. She looked at him, eyes shining. This wouldn't have happened without you. He shook his head. None of this matters without you and Zoe. They descended the courthouse steps slowly, letting the sunlight soak into their faces. A taxi honked. Pigeons fluttered past. Halfway down, Lena stopped. Do you ever feel like your life split in two? She asked. Before and after the worst day? Marcus swallowed. All the time, he said. She searched his face. And now? He breathed in. Now I'm finally seeing the bridge between the halves. She smiled, something healing sparking between them. Back at the apartment, Zoe launched herself into her mother's arms the second they walked through the door, then turned to Marcus. Did the judge wear a robe? She asked eagerly. She did, Marcus said. Was it like on TV? Better, Lena answered, because we walked out together. That night, they sat around the small table with steaming bowls of chicken soup and crackers, Zoe's pick. Lena lit a small candle she'd been saving for a good day. Marcus raised his mug of tea. To justice, he said. Zoe lifted her juice. To marshmallows, she added. Laughter filled the room. When Marcus finally headed home, the air felt cooler but kinder. Passing a shop window, he caught his reflection. He didn't see the detached executive he'd been for years. He saw a man softened at the edges, a man whose life wasn't defined solely by what he'd lost. On his wrist, the 2 yarn bracelets, faded, slightly frayed, were still holding, just like him. Spring tiptoed into the city, tentative and slow. Central Park traded gray for green. Trees budded, flowers slipped through the soil, and the lake thawed. With each passing week, Marcus found himself at Lena's door more often. What had begun as an act of conscience evolved into something deeper, mutual, steady, real. He wasn't simply helping Lena and Zoe survive. He was slowly, undeniably becoming part of their family. The apartment, once a temporary refuge, now carried the small signatures of permanence. A blazer of his hanging in the closet, Zoe's artwork taped everywhere. The rhythms of their life settled. The kettle whistling in the mornings, Zoe's laughter bouncing down the hallway, Marcus and Lena washing dishes shoulder to shoulder, comfortable in the quiet. Yet outside their cocoon, eyes were turning. At Carter and Row, curious whispers multiplied. A board member quietly asked Carla about Marcus's new priorities. An investor inquired who the woman and child were that someone had spotted leaving Marcus's building on a Sunday afternoon. Curiosity, in their world, was rarely innocent. Then came the article. One Monday, Carla stood by Marcus's desk, pale. "It's in the Tribune," she said, holding up a printout. Lifestyle section. The headline was coy but loaded. Power, privilege, and a personal project. Who's the woman living in Marcus Carter's shadow? A grainy photo showed Lena and Zoe entering the building, Zoe laughing, Lena carrying groceries. No names yet, no accusations, but the implication was clear enough to ignite speculation. Marcus's grip tightened on the paper. "Find out where this leaked," he said. "I want to know who fed them details." "It's already bouncing around online," Carla replied. "The board's called an emergency session. They're demanding an explanation." Marcus sat down slowly, suddenly aware of how small his corner office felt. That afternoon, he met Lena on their usual bench, the folded article burning a hole in his coat pocket. "I should have seen this coming," he said. Lena read the piece silently, her fingers trembling just enough for him to notice. Are they going to fire you? She asked. Marcus let out a short, humorless laugh. You don't exactly fire a Carter from Carter and Row, he said. But they'll use it. Question my judgment. Frame you as some scandalous distraction. Lena folded the paper carefully. I never asked for this attention, she whispered. I don't want to be a headline. I know, Marcus replied, and I'll protect you both, whatever it takes. She looked away, jaw tight. I've spent my whole life refusing to be someone's burden, she said. You aren't, he insisted. You've never been. But the shadows were already creeping in around their bright little world. The board meeting was brutal. 12 executives sat in a polished glass room, their suits crisp, their faces carefully unreadable. At the head of the table, the chair, Helena March, folded her hands. We have concerns, Marcus, she began. Clients are asking questions. The press is circling. Perception matters. If you're asking whether I used company funds to support Lena and Zoe, Marcus said evenly, the answer is no. This goes beyond finances, Helena replied. This is about optics and stability. Investors want to know if your involvement is compromising your objectivity. Another director leaned forward, eyes narrowed. There's worry, frankly, that your relationship with Miss Ortiz has become complicated, he said. That personal entanglements are clouding executive judgment. Marcus's gaze sharpened. Are you saying compassion disqualifies leadership now? He asked quietly. We're saying you've built this firm on distance and discipline, Helena responded. Right now, your image is evolving. Marcus stood, heart hammering but voice steady. 4 years ago, I lost my wife and son in a car accident, he said. You all remember that. I kept this place running on autopilot, made money, signed papers, pretended I was still alive. Then I met a little girl who offered me a bracelet. Her mother, he continued, fought every day to keep going with nothing. No safety net, no favors. They reminded me what being human actually feels like. He looked around the table. I won't apologize for that. I won't distance myself from the only thing that's given my life meaning again just so everyone stays comfortable. Helena held his gaze. Are you saying you'd risk your position here over this? She asked. Marcus nodded once. If basic decency is a liability now, he said, then yes, I'll risk it. Without waiting for a response, he walked out, adrenaline surging, afraid, but clearer than he'd felt in years. That night, he told Lena everything. Her face drained of color. You can't lose your company because of us, she said. I'm not losing it, Marcus replied. I'm choosing not to sell my soul to keep it. She searched his expression for doubt and found none. I never wanted to be the reason, she whispered. You're the reason I'm standing upright instead of just existing, Marcus said quietly. They sat in heavy silence, not empty, but thick with honesty and fear. Finally, Lena asked, So, what happens now? Marcus reached into his pocket and unfolded a drawing Zoe had made, 3 stick figures under a blazing sun. Now, he said, smoothing the paper, we keep moving, one step at a time. Lena's lips curved. I can walk with that, she murmured. 3 days later, the news broke. Marcus Carter was stepping down as CEO of Carter and Row Capital. Speculation exploded. Burnout, scandal, secret deal. But the truth was simpler. He wasn't stepping back. He was stepping toward a different life. The apartment grew quieter without his constant calls, but somehow more alive. Marcus cooked more. Zoe taught him ridiculous dances from kids' videos. Lena studied late for her nursing coursework. Flashcards spread across the coffee table like confetti. One evening, Zoe wandered into the living room holding the original bracelet, the yarn stretched thin from years of wear. "It's getting loose," she said sadly. Marcus knelt. "That's okay," he told her. "Things we keep close for a long time change shape. Doesn't mean they stop mattering." Zoe carefully knotted it tighter around his wrist. "I still want you to wear it," she said. "I still like it." He smiled, throat tight. "Me too, kiddo." In that small, ordinary moment, the roar of the outside world faded, leaving only what truly counted, the little family they'd chosen. Early summer arrived, humming with heat and possibility. Life didn't suddenly become easy. Bills still needed paying, ghosts still woke Marcus in the night, but it became tangible, grounded. Morning started with coffee and Zoe's chatter, not conference calls. The hum of a box fan replaced the whir of private jets. Marcus began writing again, something he hadn't done since college. Short essays, reflections, half-finished stories about grief and second chances, about bravery that looked like showing up to parent-teacher meetings, not hostile takeovers. He didn't miss earnings reports. He didn't miss shareholder calls. He didn't miss pretending money was enough. Lena passed her final nursing exams with honors. When the email arrived, she didn't scream. She just exhaled a breath she'd been carrying for years. Marcus walked into the kitchen in time to see her smile, exhausted, luminous. "You did it," he said. "We did it," she answered. "For Zoe." They hugged. No speeches, just quiet victory. That same week, Zoe brought home a crumpled flyer for the school's end-of-year show. "We're doing a play," she announced. "I'm a sunflower." Lena kissed her cheek. "You've always been one," she said. Marcus immediately marked the date on the calendar. "Front row," he promised. "Loudest claps." The night of the performance, the small auditorium buzzed with parents and restless kids. Marcus sat beside Lena, clutching a ridiculous bouquet of daisies. When Zoe appeared on stage in a cardboard petal headdress and yellow shirt, his chest ached with pride. She spoke her line clearly. "Even when it rains, the sun's still there." The audience applauded. Zoe scanned the crowd until she found them. When she spotted Marcus and Lena waving, her whole face lit up. The flowers in Marcus's hand suddenly felt weightless compared to the joy pounding in his chest. Afterward, they smothered her in hugs and took too many pictures. A few days later, the three of them strolled through Riverside Park. Zoe ran ahead chasing bubbles from a street vendor, barefoot in the grass. Lena walked slowly beside Marcus, her arm linked through his. "Everything still feels fragile," she admitted, "like one gust of wind could knock it all over." "Maybe that's because it is," Marcus said. "But fragile doesn't mean weak. It means we handle it with care." She studied him. "What about your next chapter?" she asked. Marcus sighed. "I've been thinking about starting something new, not another firm, a foundation. For people like you and Zoe, families shoved to the edges because no one's looking down to pull them up," he continued. Lena stopped walking. "You're serious?" "Already filed the paperwork," Marcus admitted. "I'm calling it the Bridge Initiative." Her eyes softened. "Like what you said outside the courthouse. About finding the bridge between the halves of your life." He nodded. "This time, I want to be that bridge." They sat on a bench as Zoe ran back, breathless. "Can we get ice cream?" she asked. Marcus stood. "Only if I'm allowed 2 scoops." Zoe gasped. 3. Lena rolled her eyes. 1 each, she decreed, laughing as they headed toward the cart. A sudden warm shower spilled from the sky, soaking the park in seconds. They ran, but not away from the rain, through it, shouting and laughing. Marcus held his jacket over Zoe's head while Lena grabbed his hand. Their shoes squeaked, their clothes clung, and somehow they'd never felt more alive. Weeks passed, the apartment filled with new plants. Zoe insisted they adopt, and stacks of medical textbooks Lena devoured. Marcus converted the tiny storage room into a modest office. A desk, a lamp, a corkboard covered in photos, scribbled ideas, and Zoe's stars cut from construction paper. It was small, but it was his. One afternoon, Lena found him gazing out the window. "What's going on in there?" she asked. He turned, smiling softly. "I was wondering if it's too soon to call this place home." Lena stepped closer. "Marcus," she said, "this became home the night Zoe wrapped that bracelet around your wrist." He looked down at the faded yarn, still stubbornly holding. "Is it strange," he asked, "that losing everything somehow led me here?" Lena rested her head against his shoulder. "No," she said, "I think it led you to us." A year later, they stood together at a different kind of ceremony. Lena, wearing a crisp white coat, accepted a position at a busy community clinic. Zoe, now devouring chapter books, wrote stories where heroes always chose kindness. Marcus, no longer a CEO, stood with them as a partner and father figure, a man who traded profit margins for something far more valuable. The Bridge Initiative quietly flourished. No flashy campaigns, no red carpet fundraisers, just rent checks paid on time for families in crisis, legal fees covered, scholarships granted, shelters held accountable. Not every story ended perfectly, but each one felt like a brick laid in something sturdy, something that would outlive any headline. On their first holiday as an official family unit, Marcus watched Lena seasoning vegetables in the tiny kitchen while Zoe slid across the tile in socks, singing off-key. The apartment smelled like rosemary and roasted garlic. Music hummed from an old speaker. Laughter bounced off every wall like light. Marcus lifted his glass of sparkling water. "To the family we found, in the most unexpected place," he said. Lena raised hers. "To the storms we survived." Zoe clinked her juice box. "To sunflowers," she shouted. They laughed, glasses meeting in the middle of mismatched plates and second-hand silverware. In that cramped kitchen, nothing dramatic happened. No reporters called, no board members judged, no court orders loomed. There was just dinner, warmth, shared glances, and the easy comfort of belonging. The extraordinary thing was how ordinary it all felt. Simple, quiet, exactly enough. The story of Marcus, Lena, and Zoe shows that family isn't defined by last names or matching faces, but by who shows up when everything falls apart, and keeps showing up after. It's about resilience, not perfection. About people who choose one another over and over, even when the world disapproves. It reminds us that healing rarely arrives in grand gestures. Sometimes it starts with a small, handmade bracelet, a hug from a brave kid in a freezing park, or a cup of cheap coffee shared on a worn-out bench. Little acts of care that, piece by piece, rebuild a shattered heart. In a culture that worships status and speed, their story celebrates something quieter, the dignity of every life, the courage it takes to protect your child when the system fails, and the strength required to let someone love you when you've convinced yourself you don't deserve it anymore. Marcus learned that walking away from power didn't make him weaker. It made room for something stronger: integrity, presence, and genuine connection. Lena discovered that asking for help didn't erase her independence. It amplified her courage. And Zoe, with her bracelets and drawings, showed them both how to hope again. The Bridge Initiative became more than paperwork and donations. It became a living echo of their journey, a promise that no mother would be punished for protecting her child, that no kid would have to sleep in fear if there was any way to stop it, that kindness could be institutionalized. Years from that first snowy day, people might forget the headlines about Marcus stepping down. They might not remember the gossip, the speculation, the outrage, but they'd remember rent paid just in time, custody battles won, degrees finished, and kids who grew up believing safety and love weren't impossible luxuries. And if anyone asked Marcus when everything changed, he would think back to a winter afternoon, a small voice asking if he needed a hug, and a child's bracelet slipping over his wrist. A moment that didn't fix everything, but shifted the entire direction of his life, one gentle inch at a time. If they asked Lena, she'd remember standing in a courtroom, telling the truth out loud for the first time without apologizing for it. She'd remember the weight of keys in her hand, the first night in a quiet apartment, and the realization that love could arrive wrapped in unexpected faces. And if they asked Zoe, she'd probably just say, "It started in the park," then tug at her own bracelet and run off to draw another picture of 3 figures under a giant sun. Because for her, the miracle wasn't complicated. It was simply that they'd found each other and stayed. Ultimately, their story is a reminder that the cracks in our lives, the losses, the failures, the nights we thought would break us, can become doorways. Not to the life we thought we wanted, but to one that's truer, softer, and somehow more solid beneath our feet. It tells us that compassion is never wasted, even when it costs us, that standing beside someone the world has written off might just save both of you, that choosing love over image, people over profit, and truth over comfort is rarely easy but always worthwhile in the long run. And if you're watching this feeling a little broken, a little alone, maybe their journey is your reminder. You are not beyond repair. Sometimes the help you need walks in looking nothing like what you expected. A neighbor, a stranger, a child with a crooked smile and a bracelet. Sometimes all it takes to begin again is saying yes to a small kindness. Letting someone stay, letting yourself care, letting go of the belief that you have to carry everything alone. Because healing doesn't ask whether you're ready. It just knocks quietly and waits for you to open the door. Marcus, Lena, and Zoe didn't rebuild their lives overnight. They stumbled, doubted, argued, and hurt, but they kept choosing one another, even when the world tried to pull them apart. That's what made them a family. Not perfection, but persistence. Not blood, but the bond of shared survival and chosen love. So wherever you are, whatever you've lost, remember this: your story isn't finished. The worst chapter is not the final page. There are still people you haven't met yet who might change everything. A future friend, a mentor, a child whose simple generosity can reroute your whole life. Maybe your bridge between before and after is closer than it looks. Maybe it's one honest conversation away, one act of courage, one moment of saying, "I need help," or "You can stay," or "I believe you." The world doesn't get better in sweeping gestures. It heals in small, faithful choices. In the end, this story is a testament to rebuilding after loss, not by erasing the hurt, but by honoring it and still choosing love anyway. Because sometimes the most powerful miracles don't arrive with fanfare. They show up as a hug in the cold, a bracelet on your wrist, and a door that finally opens. Chosen family heals what loss breaks. If you're in your late 60s or beyond, you know how heavy an empty house can feel. Marcus had money, a high-rise view, and a heart frozen in place, until a girl's hug and a yarn bracelet pulled him back toward life. Simple dinners, school events, and rainy walks didn't erase grief, but they quietly proved that love can begin again, even after loss. Friends, after hearing how a simple hug in Central Park slowly rebuilt Marcus's life, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever had a small act of kindness, a visit, a phone call, a grandchild's drawing, that pulled you through a dark season? What did it mean to you, especially at this stage of life? Share your story in the comments, tap the like button, and subscribe to my YouTube channel so we can keep sharing hope and strength together. Tell me where you're watching from and what lesson this story reminded you of from your own journey. And don't forget to turn on the notification bell